Hello! Welcome to the Knit Your Own Adventure Summit. I am so excited that you decided to join me today. So, my name is Katie, aka Knit Life Oils on Instagram and YouTube. So, I started my Instagram page about 5 years ago, and I realized that people really liked watching what I was doing. So, I've done quite a few different things over the years and taught some different techniques, and you guys think of it as teaching and I think of it as just showing you what I'm doing. So it kind of all works in the end. So I've been knitting for, I think it's almost 20 years now, and I've done a lot of different techniques and things like that in my knitting career. I love bright colors and I love working with fingering weight yarn. You will rarely find me working with anything else. And I would tell you a little bit about my life outside of knitting, except I don't really have a life outside of knitting, and that's just my whole personality. So that's kind of it. So today I am going to teach you something that I don't see very often in videos and in the knitting space, which is fixing dropped cast on stitches. So when you are casting on, sometimes one of them falls off, and it's usually in the middle of a row, and it's usually when there's tons of stitches on the needles, right? So there's like 300 stitches that you cast on, you perfectly counted, you triple checked the count, and then you drop one. Now, usually we think that the only way to fix this is to pull it all out, right? So it's not. We can actually fix it, which I think is awesome, because then I don't have to do it all over again. So the one thing about this is that the technique changes based on which cast on you did, because they are all done differently. Therefore, how we fix a drop stitch in that cast on changes for each one. So I'm going to go over this for 4 different cast ons today. We're going to go over how to do the cast on and then how to fix a drop stitch, and maybe tell a few stories in between. So the 4 cast ons we're going to do are long tail, provisional, invisible provisional cast on, knitted cast on, and cabled cast on. So first we're going to start with long tail cast on. So this is the cast on that a lot of people first learn when they start knitting. It's pretty versatile. You can use it for a lot of different things, and it's easy to start with, and it just kind of builds on itself, and you can kind of keep working with it as you go. So let's take a look at how you do it. Long tail cast on. To do this cast on, you need to start in the middle of your yarn, which means you're going to have a tail and your working yarn. I'm only going to do about 10 stitches, so I don't need a very long tail. If you were doing more stitches, you would need a longer tail, and that can get a little tricky to estimate. But for this, so then I'm going to position this over my thumb and second finger this way with the tail over my thumb like this. And then I'm going to take my needle. To start, I'm just going to go up into the middle, and then I'm going to go in front of my thumb, over my second finger, and back. So then we're going to do it again. Second finger, or thumb, second finger, and down. Thumb, second finger, down. All right, I'm going to cast on about 10 stitches, and then we will get to the next part. So that's 5, 6, 7, thumb, second finger, 8, thumb, second finger, 9, thumb, there we go, and that should be 10. Let's double count. 2, 4, 6, 8. Oh, I might have gotten an extra one. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. Okay, we did get an extra one there. Or something funny happened. Oh yeah, we kind of picked up a straggler there. Let's just do another one. There we go. All right. Okay, so we have 10 stitches cast on. Now we're going to start to knit them. So here we go. And then we're going to drop a stitch. I know, it's scary, but we're going to fix it. Don't worry. Okay. So we're going to drop this stitch. So this is long tail cast on. So if you see there are 2 strands that come up. So the bottom one and the top one. So the bottom one, we need to make a loop, like a stitch, and it needs to be a full loop. So I'm going to kind of, and however you need to do that is fine. Sometimes I use my fingers, but we can use the needles here. And so I just kind of slipped it around. There we go. Well, that didn't really work. Let's try that again. Okay. So I kind of like to do it this way, and then I just make my little loop here and then stick it on my needle. So see how it's fully looped? So that's with the bottom strand. So then I'm going to pick up the second strand with my needle and lift this first stitch up and over like this. And now we have fixed that. So now we can knit it, and if we knit the rest, it's going to be a little bit loose and it will kind of ease back into the rest of the cast on. There we go. Okay. So if we finish this cast on up, see, it just kind of eased back in there, and we did not have to pull out our entire cast on to fix it. So next we're going to talk about invisible provisional cast on. So this is a way to keep live stitches on your cast on edge. So normally when you cast on stitches, that cast on is what I guess we would call closed. So you would have to pick up those stitches in order to knit the other direction. So if you use an provisional cast on, you can knit the other direction, or at the end, you can get those stitches back on the needle, and then it will create a seamless join. So I like to use this in a couple places. For cowls, then I can graft the two sides together, and then you won't ever know where the beginning of the cowl was. Another place is for like the bottom of a bag. That creates a really seamless, strong bottom. For shoulders, like this, if you do an invisible provisional cast on, then you can join these two sides together when you are ready. Invisible provisional cast on. So what we need to do is make stitches that are live on the needles, but also can be picked up later. So you can use waste yarn as your second strand, but I like to use a knit extension cord. So that way, when I'm ready to use these stitches, I can just slip my needle into the end of this, and then all of the stitches go right back on the needle and are ready to use. So if you were to use waste yarn, you would have to pick the stitches up, and this just makes it one less step. So whether you use an extra cable, a knit extension cord, or waste yarn, you'll want to make a knot here, and then we're going to work around this knot. So the needle is going to go on top of the knot. You take the knot out later. Don't worry. So we're going to go down through the center, around the front strand, around the back strand, up and back. Okay, let me do that again. Down through the middle, around the front, around the back, around the front again, and back to the middle. Okay, I'm going to do it a little faster. So it's kind of like a dance that we're doing with our left hand and our two strands here. Okay, so this is 10. Okay, so I'm also going to make sure that this working yarn goes under on the last stitch so that it loops for that last stitch and it's easier to knit. So then we're going to start knitting our cast on. Okay, so now let's look at how to fix the drop stitch. So if you look here, we're going to look because we know that we're dropping a stitch. So this one is connected here and it's also looped up here. So when this drops off, we need to get it back looped under and over the top and onto the next one, right? Okay, so this is going to drop off. And see how it kind of jumped here? So we need to make sure that we don't lose any stitches, of course. So the first thing we need to do is get this back to the other side of our waste yarn, or in this case, our knit extension cord. So we're gonna get this back to the other side, okay? So now none of the other stitches are moving around. and then we're going to pop it back on the needle. So the good part about this is that because of the waste yarn knit extension cord cable, the stitch can't run very far. So you can always get the strand back. So now we've got it back on. It's exactly how it was before. And now we can finish our cast on, and we are never the wiser. Knitted cast on. So this is used as kind of a base for a few different cast-ons, and then there is variations. What's great about this is you are literally just knitting the stitches onto the needle. And so it's really easy to teach someone because it's not a new stitch. It's just kind of closing it versus doing it with 2 needles. And so it's the same movement as regular knitting. You just put it onto the needle in a slightly different way. So I don't love this cast on for like everyday use. It gets a little bit flimsy and it's not quite as stable as some others, but I do really like using this when I have to cast on stitches in the middle of a project. It can be really easy to just go into a stitch and knit some more on for like an armhole opening. That would be a really good place to use that. If you needed to cast on new stitches for like a buttonhole or something like that, that tends to be a really easy place to use knitted cast on stitches as well. So for the knitted cast on, we're going to start with a slip knot like this, and that is going to be our first stitch on the needle. So now we're going to use this slip knot to make the rest of our stitches, and we're just going to knit them onto the needle. And I'll show you what I mean by that. So see how this looks like you're knitting a stitch? So knit the stitch, and then you're going to put it on the needle. So that's the only difference, is that instead of just kind of pulling it off, you're going to put the new stitch onto the needle like this, and then you're just going to keep knitting them on. So this is really easy for beginners to learn because it's not a new motion. It's still just knitting onto the needle. How many do we have? 2, 4, 6, 8, 9. Let's do one more. Okay, so we have 10 stitches. Now we're going to start knitting them. So the super cool thing about this is that because of the way these are done, it is really easy to fix a drop stitch. So if you can see here, there's just a second strand on top of these strands. Ready? So this is going to fall off. And now all we have to do to fix the drop stitch is pick it back up. That's it. Super simple to fix drop stitches with knitted cast on. That is a huge bonus with knitted cast on, that it is not hard to fix drop stitches. So if we get to the end, we can't even tell that there was a drop stitch. Okay, so I saved my favorite one for last. This is called cabled cast on. And now I use cabled cast on for just about everything. So I'm going to tell you a little story. When I first started knitting, like I said, was taught first the long tail cast on. And I did this for several years and it was fine, but my cast on stitches were super tight. So I'm going to tell you a little secret. I am a tight knitter. And in my opinion, I just pull everything super tight and then it's all the same tension. And so that's kind of how I've always done my knitting. And that became a little bit of a problem with a cast on because you couldn't move the stitches on the needles. So I was starting my first big project and it was like this mesh cover up thing. I was like 18. I have no idea why I was making this, but I was. And so my friend was helping me cast on and she took my cast on from me and she's like, "These don't move." And I was like, "Yeah, that kind of happens to me a lot." And she goes, "Okay, great. So we're going to learn a new cast on." And then she starts pulling out my 300 stitch cast on. And I was like, "Okay, I don't know why you're doing this." And she's like, "We're going to learn something new." And so she taught me cabled cast on. Now, the thing that I love about cabled cast on is that I can control the tension. So I don't have to worry about it being too loose or too tight because all of the stitches are 1 needle width apart. Therefore, it's all consistent. And so I don't have to worry about the tension being off, but it's also loose enough because it's 1 needle width apart. So I use this cast on for everything. I use it for cowls, I use it for sweaters, I use it for hats, I use it for fingerless gloves, all kinds of stuff. So the good news about that is I have lots of examples. So I thought I would show you a couple of these. Let me make sure this is the cast on and not the bind up. Here we go. Okay. So this is what a cable cast on looks like on a finished project. If you kind of see that, it looks a little bit loopy, which is where it gets its name from. And here's another example. So it just kind of loops along there at the bottom. I don't mind using it for ribbing. That doesn't bother me. And so I can show you a little bit. There is some stretch here, and it also snaps back pretty nicely. So if you see how it doesn't flare too much, and I really like that as well. A cable cast on starts very similar to a knitted cast on. We're going to start with a slip knot, and then we're actually going to just knit the first stitch on just like a knitted cast on. So cable cast on is a variation of knitted cast on. So for the third stitch, we're going to go between these first two stitches, up and around. So now, before I tighten this stitch, I'm going to put my needle back between the stitches. Now I can tighten it as much as I need to, and all of my stitches will end up one needle width apart. So as long as you wait to have that needle back between the stitches before you tighten it, you won't be able to get your cast on too tight, and everything ends up nice and even, which is why I like this cast on so much. So how many do we have? 2, 4, 6, 8, 9, 10. Okay, so there are a couple of things about fixing drop stitches with a cabled cast on. So the first thing is that you're very rarely going to drop a cabled cast on stitch. And that is because of how it is wound between the other strands. So when this falls off, look how much I'm pulling and this isn't coming out. So in that case, just put it back on the needle and keep going. So that's the good news. You're least likely to drop a stitch with cabled cast on. The bad news is that if you do drop a stitch, it is pretty tricky to fix it. But I am going to show you. So watch what happens when this stitch falls out though. So it is intertwined between these stitches and over here. So to fix it, we need to go back between these two stitches and then put this strand up on the needle like this, and then make our stitch again. And then we need to loop it through with this. So we're going to pick up the stitch that's under the stitch on the right needle, and it will go up and over. And this does have 2 strands, and that's okay because we want to make sure everything gets tightened up. There we go. Okay, so it's a little tricky, but we got everything put back where it needs to go. And there we go. So this will ease back in, but there you go. Okay, so let's do a little recap. Long tail cast on. When you fix a long tail cast on stitch, you have to kind of go up and over and get the stitch back on. It is possible to do though. Invisible provisional cast on, you can kind of just work it back up because it's on the working yarn or the knit extension cord already, and so you just kind of put it back. And third, for knitted cast on, super easy because you just pick the stitch back up. It's probably the easiest one to fix a drop stitch with. And then fourth is cable cast on. Now cable cast on is probably the one that you are going to drop the stitches the least. And that is because when they fall off the needle, they're coiled with each other, so they don't fall off as easily. So, and then if you do actually drop the stitch, it is kind of in and out to kind of get it back on, but they very rarely drop, so that is a nice little bonus with cable cast on. So if you enjoyed these techniques, and I really hope you did, because I hope it saves you some time and it keeps you from having to pull out your cast-ons all the time, I have a 15 techniques freebie. They are all things that people on my Instagram love, and it is a list and it has links that you can see the video and you can learn all of these different techniques and use them in your knitting to hopefully make your life easier. So you can download that at the bottom of this video. And I hope that you learned so many things from the Knit Your Own Adventure Summit, and thank you so much for spending your time with me, and I hope to see you soon.